Rick, well, thanks for letting me stay another night in your house.
Well, you're living here now, right?
Yeah, you know it. It's blazing. It's blazing here in Arizona, man, with the heat and even 100 degrees in Sedona feels different than 100 degrees down here in Phoenix. So,
But especially when there's snow on the ground and it's still 100.
exactly.
I don't know how you did it, man, but you pulled it off.
That's right, man. I did, man. Hey, so I thought we do a podcast. We done one many, many years ago on fear, but I thought we maybe revisit the topic, a few years later. And the title of this one is going to be "Fear is an Illusion." And my friend Amy H gave me this one. So let me have you kick it off about fear is an illusion.
Well, the first thing I would say is that if it's an illusion, it's a pretty damn real one because we're afraid all the time, or at least many of us are. I am. I think I said in this podcast before, I still go into work every day worrying that I've done something stupid or I'll get sued for malpractice justifiably because I've forgotten to calendar something or I've got a lot of balls in the air, and of course, you're always worried about them. And it's not only professional worries; it's stuff about my relationship. He said something a little strange, or she said something a little off the mark, and I'm a little afraid that maybe there's a crack in our solid relationship. I think all of those things we have to look at. I think those signals that come up from us and for us are an opportunity to look and see if there's anything underneath that's important. But the point about fear is that it truly is a self-creation. It's a defense mechanism because I think we're largely, as humans, run by a negativity bias. So it is evolutionary. It helps us look at things that could be threats and avoid them. And so with the fear coming up, it tells us there's a stimulus out there, whatever it might be, whatever that trigger is for you. There's a stimulus that's causing me to feel I am afraid. I need to do something. I need to correct it, to flee or to fight or ignore or be bitchy or whatever your defense mechanism is that you fall back on. But the reality is it's a false experience because there's usually nothing that's caused the fear except your interpretation of a set of circumstances which triggers you into believing. Give an example. Public speaking is a big deal for a lot of people that elicits great worry and great fear. And I try cases. So I'm about to start a trial here in a couple of weeks. And so I find myself sometimes, especially at night when it's quiet and things are going well, something out of the blue will hit me and I'll think, oh my goodness, I haven't done anything that I can do, that I should do to protect against this bad thing occurring. But then I have to stop myself and think, okay, I've already prepared this and I already have an answer to it. Let's do this. How about if I go in the office tomorrow and I'll check that out. But for now, I'm letting that go. I'm letting that fear go. So I think it's a false experience, number one. And number two, if you can get on the other side of it and deal with it in a way that makes sense for you. For me, it's deferring it until another time or taking a look at something that would resolve the fear by some objective standard, not by your own head, but say, like in my example of not being prepared, reassuring myself the next day at work, yes, I am prepared. Then the only thing you have to get used to is, okay, I'm standing up in front of a bunch of strangers, asking them to believe what I'm telling them. What right do I have to do for that? This is way beyond my pay grade. Those are things which are creations. And you have to remember your mind is not your friend often, and especially in this area of fear. So if you just run with that, you're done. There's a loop you'll never get past. You've got to stop and get to the point and say, it's not happening now. Let's say if I go in front of my group and I'm doing my thing and my pants fall off, then I'll deal with that issue and be embarrassed. But right now, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, and there never will be until something like that happens. So I think first identifying that you're the cause of your fear, and then secondly, having a strategy to get past whatever your ego is telling you haven't done well enough or that there's a problem about, having some sort of objective test for knowing that you are prepared. Those two things I think are really helpful. Finally, the last thing about fear, the more we allow it in our lives, the better our ego gets at feeding it to us. So the more you think about things that are fearful, the more afraid you will be. And my suggestion is that for people who find themselves in that is to try to get around people who aren't afraid. You know, one of the things that you do, for example, when we're all skiing together, there are places I would never go if it wasn't for being with you guys, right? I just wouldn't do it because I'd be too afraid. But if I see three guys going down in front of me, well, what the hell? It's the worst going to happen. So I do it. I think that's kind of a poor example, but it's an example I think that holds. If you can be around people who aren't afraid and just pretend that you're not afraid too, that will help you sort of feel what it's like to overcome that fear. So that's one strategy you might try as well. What about you? What do you think? Any ideas of how you get through your fears?
Yeah, well, I'll just pick up on what you said. Is what's really helped me with my fears is that knowing that I prepared well is one thing. So when I'm prepared, there's really no need to be fearful in terms of what my performance is going to be. And then anything outside of my own performance and my control over it, the outcome is out of my hands. So knowing that, logically, there's nothing I can do. So why be fearful of that? And unless there's some kind of narrative that I am identified so strongly with that for some reason, I think my happiness is tied to this outcome. And that's just a recipe for suffering. And so I start there. In terms of having people around me, I want to make sure that if I'm being led by people around me as like, well, they're doing it, so I can do it, then I just want to check, like, what are those people like? Like, what's the practice? So with respect to the ski hill, I'm like, man, this dude's like, his whole life is reckless. So I'm not following him. I'm following the other guys, like they got something to live for. You know what I'm saying? They got a family at home, they got kids, they love their family at home. Like I'm following those dudes, you know what I'm saying? Or, down the hill. But if I got a guy out there who's got nothing to live for, like, no, man, you go ahead. I'll take the lift chair down. So I'm really checking my audience. Are they kind? If I'm going to let them be an inspiration or motivator for me to step out into to something that's not my comfort zone. And then I think the next thing I do with respect to fear in my life is, it's like with everything else, man, that has potential to cause me suffering, whether it's anxiety or worry or ruminations or feeling of blame, shame, guilt, whatever that is. I'm checking the narrative. Like what am I telling myself? And I think, when we talk about, being fearful, we often in our society here, we point to like all the external media that's out there, whether it's the news or social media, or whether it's somebody else who's really identified with a certain ideology, that how they can make us afraid of other people that look different than us, or some kind of situation potentially that's outside of our control. But the way that I look at that is that while that's a concern for me, I can't control that out there other than not to tune into it. I'm also concerned about, like you mentioned, my ego. Like that's the enemy. That's the enemy within. Like right. I'm sleeping with that enemy, and so so I'm concerned about what that one is feeding me. And so I'm making sure that I stay on top of my practice, stay on top of doing the things that inform me being peaceful, so that fear really has no opening. And you've taught me that, man, for years, man, about being rooted in nature, about the books you read and the authors that you bring into your consciousness. So that's been a great help for me to not fall prey to fear, so to speak. And so, for me, fear has been an illusion. Like if I go back to like when I was when the pandemic hit and I was off from Mayo Clinic for, at the time, it was indefinitely. And so it ended up being a year. And that time that I was off, man, I never stepped into like, how am I going to pay my bills? Like, what does this mean for my future? What am I going to do about retire? Like, I didn't step into any of that, man. My first thing was, how can I serve? Can I volunteer? Like, can I volunteer today? And by shifting my focus to for something I had control over, which is being open to another possibility, then it really like silenced any kind of fear that was on the that was on the other side, that was in opposition to a desire to be peaceful. And so, and I credit my practice with helping me stay oriented that way. Like I'm always facing toward peacefulness and joy and kindness and serving. And I'm not facing toward things that are self-serving. Or I used to be. And so I would have handled situations like that completely different. And I'm also looking at people, and the whole time, I'm always like, connect with the humanity in other people, connect with the humanity. Just because somebody behaves poorly, it's unconscious behavior. And I don't think you have to look further than, what are people feeding themselves all the time? Are they feeding themselves things that perpetuate a narrative or support a narrative that is fear-based? I expect them to show up as unconscious, you know? And if you see me slip, Rick, you'd be like, oh, goodness, he's on some kind of fear kick right now.
You don't slip. You don't slip, man.
I'm trying not to, Rick. I'm trying, man. But so that's how I deal with it. So thank you for asking. I'm gonna have you finish it off for us. I love your example about going into the courtroom. I love your physical example about, you know, about skiing and being active. But you know, you just are so good at walking through that door to the other side, beyond fear.
Well, thank you, Keith. I'm not. I mean, I'm still afraid. Here's the important point that folks should get. I don't think you ever get to the point where you're not afraid. I mean, that's an evolutionary thing. It's like hunger. You know, it's a trigger that's there to protect you. You never get past feelings of fear. The idea is that you feel the fear and you do it anyway, right? That's where the monitoring, the self-monitoring comes in.
Exactly.
I think there's a couple of things that folks should keep an eye on too. And that is that for me, in my life, I found that I've been most fearful when I've been trying to maintain control, or I have a trust issue with something happening. I was at my most fearful in life when I had the lowest tolerance for ambiguity. And life is nothing but ambiguous, right? So the more we trust that things are going to work out, or that you're going to be fine, right? The more we trust that, the less fear there is, because you think, okay, if that shows up, I can handle it. I don't want that to happen, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to bring about what I think I want. But at the end of the day, it's not my call. And so I think if you let it go like that and you're comfortable with ambiguity, there's less fear. At least if the fear is there, it's not is self-defeating. It seems like you're at least giving yourself some control by letting it go, right? I think the last thing I'd like to mention too is that with fear, not only is it a trust issue and dealing with ambiguity issue, a control issue, all of those things show up in our lives all the time, because that's part of what the ego does. And when we get to the realization that expectations, the idea that you want something to be a certain way, and if it's not that way, I'm going to be mad, or I am mad. When you're trying to control the externals, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. You have to get to some point, and I think this is helpful with heavy exercise, a good sleep routine, and meditation. You have to get to a point using all of those things where you're more or less impervious. That's the wrong word. You're more or less better able to cope with what comes to you, what comes at you. And I think some of the fear drops away. As I've aged, I've found that I'm better able to prioritize because I have less time to waste, right? If you have 60 years of life ahead of you, a lot of things can bother you. But if you have 10 or 5, not much bothers you except maybe half a dozen things. You know, my relationship with my son, what I'm doing for my clients, maintaining this house as a legacy for him. Those become, you know, those are my priorities right now. They're not about what what the judge thinks of me, or, is the guy down the street going to give me a referral because I did a great job, or are people going to know I was in my backyard naked last night? I don't give a damn, honestly. Anyway, point is, fear is real. We do have an evolutionary thing of fear. You'll never get over it, but there are things that you can do to cope with it. And those things, like meditation and nutrition and exercise and thinking that I'm the cause of my fear, I'm self-creating, I think are helpful for you to get through them. And then finally, I would say that no matter what, fear is always going to be there. And if you want happiness in life, you're just going to have to deal with that, detach from the outcome, and feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, I agree, Rick. And excuse me, I'll say one last thing is, as you were talking, you just hit me really well. And like the things that we as human beings allow to really exploit the fear, the biological safety mechanism that we have regarding fear, when almost the majority of the time it's not justified, like you said, but we want it to be black and white. We want certainty. And when we don't get that, because that's not how life is set up, it's more about ambiguity and a ton of gray.
That's right.
We had to be really aware of, like, oh my God, this is what's normal. Like this is the normal part, not the other part. And I just think about the little things we make fear. Like, so for example, like right now in the country, like especially in Arizona, housing is out of control. Like what houses are selling for right now is ridiculous. But if you're a person who's like, I got to have this house and we got to put the offer in, and if we don't get this house, it's all over. And like easy. just I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God, I'm up for for this promotion, and if I don't get this, my career path is like, settle down. It's just, you just feel it rising, like every moment becomes life or death. If you live in life like that,
yeah, that's right.
You are literally, maybe you're not like the rest of us. Like there's no time clock for you. You're not on the journey to zero. I mean saying the hourglass is stopped. I mean, like, you're gonna live forever. But I just don't have time to be giving away my precious moment. Like, I mean, this precious gift like that to that anymore. I can't do it, Rick. Like, every moment is not life or death anymore, man. Like, it's not like there's only one moment, and whatever form it takes on in this moment, I'm learning to be with it. I'm learning to be with it and not be with fear. So I think I want to close with that, Rick. You want to just send us off?
Okay. Well, we've been doing this back and forth. Like, one more thing. I think fear is a big deal. It just shows you how important this whole topic is. We probably should talk more about it. But I'd love to hear what some of the listeners have to say. This would be cool, if we could do this like with 100 people and have them all, on the feed, the camera feed, and have just each person talk a little bit about what their experience has been. Heck, I'd learn a lot from there. I think that would be really worthwhile. But I guess I wanted to also say, if you go through life, this is kind of, let me put it this way. Maybe one of the things that might help people would be, how about just adapting on some smaller fears? The idea, let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to do what I want to do, and let's just see what happens. I'm kind of curious. Let's just see what happens.
A small one would be like, you leave home and you forget your phone.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one.
What would it be like if I go to work and I don't have my phone all day? Like that would be a good one to start off with, something easy, Well, for some people, if you're so identified with your phone and you're like, oh my God, my whole life is my phone, that might be challenging for you, But
here's another good one, Keith. How about, people are so freaked out about travel? I mean, it's just so crazy. So what happens if you go to the airport and your flight is canceled? Oh my God. I mean, that's a trigger for so many people. Oh, we're alone in a strange city, or even if it's our city, we're alone in an airport. We have to sleep here, blah, blah, blah. And you start, so maybe you just make that an adventure. Let's see what happens. I don't know, might kind of be fun. Instead of going to LA, maybe we'll go to San Francisco for the weekend and, hang there for a bit. I mean, the point is you have control of all of that. And if you let the fear get in the way of it, you're missing out a lot. And you're also creating suffering. You're just grinding yourself. Anyway, that's we can talk about fear all day. I just think if you row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
I love it.
Little of that.
Let's close it there. I love you, man.
I love you, buddy. Adios.
Adios.